Okay, good morning, class. How are we this morning? Good, good. You enjoy the summer break, all the stories? Do you enjoy that? Sitting around the campfire hearing stories? Yes? Good, good. Well, break's over. It's time for school. And this semester, we are going to be learning from the master teacher himself, Jesus Christ. And we're going to be focusing on 3 chapters, 5, 6, 7. Yes, 3 chapters in the Gospel according to Matthew that we often refer to as the Sermon on the Mount, which is kind of a misnomer, if you will. It's really not a sermon as much as it's a collection of teachings. It's lessons from Christ, if you will. Perhaps it should be called instructions from the Mount. It even says right in the 2nd verse of chapter 5, then he began to speak and taught them, saying, so forth and so on. And we're going to begin with the Beatitudes, but before we get there, we're going to talk about something else. Part of the reason for this whole sermon series is some years ago I listened to a TED Talk. I'm not sure if you know what TED Talks are. If you don't, Google it, you'll figure it out. But in this TED Talk, the person was talking about our model for education, how we teach, what we teach, and why we teach that. And this person's theory is that this is a throwback to the days of empire, to those days when France and Spain and Portugal and England were all colonizing the known world, sending people out all over the world, conquering the lands, inserting their own culture into that land, doing all the nice things that colonizers do. And the empire needed some skill sets. The empire needed some people who were able to write correspondence so they could communicate with these colonies. They needed people who could read that correspondence because communication does no good if you can't hear it. And they also needed people who could add up the numbers, who could keep the books, who could keep the ledgers for how wealthy they were becoming on the backs of these colonized people. So they needed these kinds of skills, so they developed a system for teaching people these skills. And from that comes our system of education, where we teach folks how to do things so those folks can make a living, so those folks can contribute to society as a whole and increase the gross domestic product and all of those things. So our education system seems to be, and I'm sure I'll get some arguments on this, but it really seems to be focused on what you can do. You need to learn some certain skills so that you can be productive in society. You need to learn certain skills so you can make a living, so you can earn money, so you can buy things like food and clothing and shelter and all of that stuff. That's all good. It's all good, but it is not by any stretch of the imagination all that there is. As I said in the video, and all those folks, the first thing that comes to your mind when somebody asks, who are you? Well, I'm Dan, I'm an engineer, or I'm Dan, I'm a doctor, or I'm Dan. And the last thing that comes to our mind is, I'm a child of God. And that's what this course is going to be about. This sermon series, these series of lessons that we're going to derive from this Sermon on the Mount. I'm going to continue calling it sermon because I can't change this late in the game, and I'm an old dog, so you're going to have to bear with me on that. But here we are going to learn what Christ has to say, not about what we can do, how we can make a living, but what Christ has to say about who we are. So your first part of your lesson, everybody get a little baggie. Did everybody get a little baggie? Yes. Inside that baggie is a pencil, 2 index cards. Excuse me. Pull out the pencil and one of the index cards, if you will, please. Does anybody not have one? Raise your hand if you do not have one. It's 1/3 of your semester grade if you don't do this work. So those of you who are familiar with this chapters 5, 6, and 7 of the Gospel according to Matthew, this Sermon on the Mount, you know that it starts with the Beatitudes, the blesseds. Blessed, blessed, blessed are, blah, blah, blah. You know all of that, and that's all very good, and we're going to get to that. But I want to start with what I believe to be the two most important passages in the whole sermon. So I want you to write this down. You are the salt of the earth. Make them write in the dark. It's more fun. You are the salt of the earth. What does it mean to be the salt of the earth? What does salt do? Close your eyes for a moment. Stop writing when you do, because otherwise it's... Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine your favorite food. Whatever that might be. Tofu, steak, beans. Now imagine it tastes kind of bland. Imagine sprinkling just a little bit of salt on that. Now take another bite. And imagine the flavor explosion that salt brings out. You can open your eyes now, because that is what salt does. It brings out the flavors. It brings out the goodness of all that it touches. It brings it out. As long as you don't use too much, it brings it out. I worked in bakeries for years, and every now and then the ingredient system would mess up and the ingredients would be missing. And trust me, bread without salt is just flat out nasty. Salt is necessary to bring out those flavors. So when Christ says, you are the salt of the earth, what do you think that might mean? Turn your card over. Salt enhances the goodness of everything it touches. Write that down. Salt enhances the goodness of everything that it touches. Got that? Didn't know you were going to have to work, did you? In the second little passage in this sermon that I believe is very, very important, Jesus says, y'all are the light of the world. So write that down. You are the light of the world. Write it down on the front side, not the side where the definition is, but on the side where it says, you are the salt of the earth. Right under that, write, you are the light of the world. So what does it mean to be the light of the world? Close your eyes again. And imagine the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. You see it in your mind's eye? Now cloak that in darkness. You can see nothing. Now imagine a single candle being lit in the corner of the space where that most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And you can see the glow begin to illuminate it. And once again, you can see it. You can open your eyes now. You are the light of the world. You illuminate the beauty of God's creation all around you. So write that down on the backside. You are the light of the world. You illuminate the beauty of God's creation all around you. So there you go. If you read nothing else in the Sermon on the Mount, I believe you have gotten to the core message that Jesus was trying to explain to his disciples, that Jesus is trying to explain to you here today. You are the salt of the earth. You bring flavor. You bring the goodness of everything around you out so everyone can experience it. You are the light of the world. You illuminate the beauty of God's creation. If you can understand that, just skip the rest of it because you understand who God has created you to be. Luckily for us who still don't quite get it, there's a whole another 2 chapters, 3 chapters to talk about it. So who in here brushes their teeth every morning? Lie if you don't, just raise your hand. I want you to take that card and tape it to the mirror beside where you brush your teeth. So every morning, when you're brushing your teeth, you can look at that card and be reminded of who you are. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Repeat that over and over in your mind because you, without doing a single thing, you are, just you simply are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And if you forget what that means, flip the card over and read it. But tape that on your mirror where you brush your teeth every morning so you can see it. And there'll be a test next week. As I said, the Sermon on the Mount begins with Beatitudes. When Jesus goes up on the mountain, he sits down and he begins to teach them. Hear these words. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak, and he taught them, saying, disciples came to him. Then he began to speak, and he taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And immediately following that is, you are the salt of the earth. So what are all of these blessings? They are not instructions. They are not what you need to strive to learn how to do. They are not for you to study and go and practice. These are the characteristics of who you are already, who God has created you to be already. All you have to do is recognize it. All you have to do is know that that muscle is in there already, and you just have to use it. So pull out that second card. And I would suggest doing this one vertically. Instead of horizontally, do it vertically. Thank you. Bless you. At the top of that card, write, today I was. And the first one is poor in spirit. Poor in spirit. So underneath where you wrote, today I was, ... poor in spirit. So what does it mean to be poor in spirit? It's rather simple. Dependent on God. So flip it over on the back of that card, write poor in spirit equals dependent on God. I know I can't do all of this by myself. I know God is there to do this with me. I am going to trust God. That is poor in spirit. If I start going too fast, just yell and I'll slow down. This is important stuff. This is very important stuff. Back on the front of your card. Today I was mournful. Mournful. M-O-U-R-N-F-U-L. I spell that one because I can't spell righteousness. What does it mean to be mournful? It's much, much more than just being sad because you lost someone near and dear to you. To be mournful, to mourn, is to lament over all of the sufferings of God's creation. To mourn is to recognize that God wills for creation to be like this, and yet it is like this. God wills that creation be peaceful and live harmoniously, and yet we have things like Uvalde and Ukraine and all of the other atrocities that we do to one another. To mourn those atrocities is to mourn. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. So on the back of your card, define mourn: to be aware of and empathetic with the sufferings of God's creation, or something along those lines. The important thing is your notes help you remember what it means to be mournful. So the next. Today I was meek. And what does it mean to be meek? Not to be weak. To be meek simply means use my power to serve rather than to be served. I use my power to serve rather than be served. I have wealth, so I use it to help you, rather than I have wealth, so I pay somebody to serve me. Make sense? Today I was hungry and I thirsted for righteousness. Back on the front of your card. Today I was hungry and thirsted for righteousness. And what does that mean? It means simply that you long for justice and you were generous. And when we're talking about justice, we're not talking about crime and punishment justice. When we talk about justice, we're talking about fair and equal distribution of the wealth of God's creation that we have been placed in. That is what justice is. Everyone is fed. Everyone is clothed. Everyone knows that they are loved. That's what justice is. It is not you were speeding, you pay a fine, or you did this and you do that. So on the back of that page, what does it mean? To hunger and thirst for righteousness, to seek justice, to seek fairness. How are we doing so far? Righteousness. Is that right? Wow, check that out. I just said a bunch of letters real fast. Hope nobody kept up. So back on the front, you should have poor in spirit, mournful, meek, hungry and thirsty for righteousness, and now merciful. Today I was merciful. Definition of merciful: more eager to forgive than to punish. More eager to forgive than to punish. We good? Front of the page, pure in heart. Today I was pure in heart. What is it to be pure in heart? On the back you can write, the inside matches the outside. It's called integrity. I am whole. I do not present a false self to the world, and on the inside I'm bitter and angry and all of those things. What you see is what you get. Back on the front, a peacemaker. A peacemaker. Today I was a peacemaker. And what is that? Simply seeking harmony in relationships. Whether it's a relationship that you are in or a relationship between people who are near you, you seek harmony in those relationships. And finally, on the front, today, I was persecuted. In the day of Christ, in the day of this gospel, this was a very real thing, to be persecuted. Meant actual physical danger and damage and harm would come to you for professing Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior of the world. Here where we are, in the time that we are, we do not face such persecution. So what would this possibly mean for us? Well, there are instances where we might be ridiculed, where we might be belittled because we choose a different way from what the world says. We choose not to take advantage of a situation just because we can take advantage of a situation. You could do that. You could get away with it. Nobody would know, and you would have a little extra cash. No. That's not who I am. Well, that's silly. You're goofy. That's as close as we can come. So on the front of your card, you should have, today I was poor in spirit. Today I was mournful. Today I was meek. Today I hungered and was thirsty for righteousness. Today I was merciful. Today I was pure in heart. Today I was a peacemaker. Today I was persecuted. You should have all that on the front of that card. Who in here brushes their teeth in the evening before they go to bed? Lie to me, everybody. Those who don't, give this card to your dentist. The rest of you, tape it to the mirror. So as you're brushing your teeth in the evening, read these and think about these and identify, yeah, today I was a peacemaker. I actually did that thing, celebrate that thing, or you could identify and say, oh, today I kind of missed an opportunity. I could have been a peacemaker, but I didn't. I let the world cover that up. Tomorrow I'm going to do better at recognizing opportunities for me to help people have more harmonious relationships with one another. I'm going to do better at being who I was created to be. I am going to do better at letting go of what the world has told me I should be and grabbing a hold more of what Christ has already told me that I am. I am the salt of the earth. I am the light of the world. Everything that I touch is enhanced, and the goodness of it comes out and out. And I am the light of the world, and the light that shines within me is the light of Christ. And when the light of Christ illuminates something, it is the most beautiful thing one could ever see. And as I recognize that I have these muscles, that I have these abilities, that this is who I am a peacemaker. I want to do more of it. I am mournful. I recognize the suffering in the world. I want to do something about it. I am meek. I have no desire for my own personal gain. With the power that I have, I want to use the power that I have so that others may know what justice is. And it has nothing to do with punishment. This is who you are. And all of the rest of this sermon is to help us to understand that this is who we are. We are blessed. Amen. So take those home. Post them on your mirrors. Make a journal if you would like. When you come back next week, when we gather together for worship next week, I'll give the opportunity for you to share, if you are so inclined, a very short share of how you recognize that sometime during that week, I really was a peacemaker. At some time during that week, I really felt poor in spirit. And when I recognized it, it brought me joy and hope and peace. So that's your homework. So take those 2 cards out of that Ziploc. Take that Ziploc with the pencil and drop it in that basket on your way out. But for right now, let's pray.